एवरीवन वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे स्टाइलिस्टिक्स के बारे में। चलिए शुरू करते हैं आज के वीडियो। स्टाइलिस्टिक्स Stylistics is a critical approach which uses the methods and findings of the science of linguistics and the analysis of literary texts. By linguistics, here is meant the scientific study of language and structures rather than the learning of individual languages. Specific term, stylistic means a scientific way of examining, interpreting the language of a literary text. It is one of the branches of applied linguistics like psycholinguistics, social linguistics, etc. It does this by applying the insights of linguistics to arrive at an interpretation of literary text. Unlike literary criticism, where focus remains not only on the language but on various aspects like history and culture of a literary text, biography of an author, so on and so forth, to arrive at the interpretation of a literary text. However, stylistics does this by the simple means of linguistic techniques. Stylistics traces its origin in the subject of antiquity, that is, rhetoric. According to Barry, stylistics is, in a sense, the modern version of the ancient discipline known as rhetoric, which taught its students how to structure an argument, how to make effective use of figures of speech, and generally how to pattern and vary speech or piece of writing so as to produce the maximum impact. Rhetoric was one of the three subjects of ancient Greeks. The other two subjects were logic and grammar. Aristotle, in his book Rhetoric, says the ways to achieve the effective means of communication lies in the usage of vocabulary, syntax, and figures of speech. These things help in creating an effect on the listener audience, hence, rhetoric becomes an art of persuasion. Initially, rhetoric was an art of persuasion through speech, but later on it came to mean all forms of eloquence along with writing. Hence, there is a close connection between rhetoric and stylistics. Stylistics as a proper discipline, as we know it today, emerged in 20th century. Thus, the linguistic theories that majorly developed in 20th century laid the foundation of stylistics. The following are some of the theories that helped stylistics emerge as an independent discipline. Ferdinand de Saussure, he was a Swiss linguist, scholar and semioticist. He studied and taught at the University of Geneva. He studied historical linguistics and interrelationship among the three classical languages, that is Latin, Greek and Sanskrit. He propounded various concepts very late in his life. He presented them in a series of lectures that he delivered in French at the University of Geneva from 1906 to 1911. Two of his students, Charles Paley and Albert Scuti, developed the notes they had taken during his lectures. They published it 3 years after Saussure's death as Corps de Linguistique General 1916. Saussure's main concepts are diachronic and synchronic language, Lange and Perol. Signifier and signifying meanings are relational, relationship between syntagmatic and paradigmatic. Russian formalism, as we know it today, had its origin in Moscow. It was initially known as the Moscow Linguistic Circle, formed in 1950. The prominent figures of the circle were Boris Eichenbaum, Viktor Sklovsky, Roman Jacobson. However, they could not continue their work in Russia due to political reasons. Thus, they migrated to Prague and founded Prague Linguistic Circle in 1926. During this time, a few Sisk linguists also joined them, like Jan Mokorowski. Later, Roman Jacobson migrated to America. However, today the work of all these linguists is known as Russian formalism, though most of their work was done outside Russia. Further, to make a distinction from other literary schools like Anglo-American New Critics, they were identified as Russian formalists. Russian formalists always maintain a distinction between standard and poetic language. In the essay Standard Language and Poetic Language, Jan Mokorowski discussed the function of poetic language. According to him, the function of poetic language is to foreground. Foregrounding gives prominence or importance to something. Opposite of foregrounding is automation. According to Victor Skloveski, the aim of foregrounding is to defamiliarize. It changes the language, disrupts the ordinary discourse. On the same lines, Boris Tomaskwski makes a distinction between plot and story. He says story is the actual sequence of real or imagined situation. Plot is the artistic representation of events. Roman Jacobson talks about the intrinsic factors involved in any communication like addresser and address. Whenever a message has an emphasis or any specific aspect of communication like if the focus is on the addressee, the listener, and then the conative function of predominates. Similarly, in a literary text, if the focus is on the poetic, then text becomes the center of discussion. When we talk about the language, using language, then language is performing a metalingual function. If we use language to confirm, renew our contacts, then phatic function dominates in our communication. The structure of our sentence depends upon the focus and function. However, a single sentence can perform different functions at a time. Structuralism. Structuralism, an intellectual movement, began in France in 1950s. It was influenced by the works of various eminent scholars and movements like Societian concepts, American structural linguistics, Russian formalism, British functional linguistics. Further, the various literary theorists like Ronald Barthes, Jonathan Culler, Claude Levi-Strauss, apart from Roman Jacobson, contributed for the establishment of structuralism as a literary theory. Of stylistics, all these eminent scholars' works and movements paved the way for the emergence of stylistics. It was in late 1950s a number of scholarly works began to apply linguistics for the interpretation of literary works. In other words, stylistics. It began with a famous conference on style held at Indiana University in 1958. The proceedings of it, published as Style and Language, edited by Thomas A. Can Linguistics and Literary Style 1970, edited by Donald C. Freeman, Essay on Style and Language 1966, and A Language of Literature by Roger Waller. What does stylistics do? The following are some of the points that stylistic do. Stylistics analyze Stylistics analysis is an objective and scientific commentary upon a literary text which is based on concrete, quantifiable data and applied in a systematic further. It emphasizes on the connections between literary and everyday language. It uses concepts of linguistics such as transitivity, interlexicalization, collocation, and cohesion, and so on and so forth. What is foregrounding? Oxford Online Dictionary defines a foreground as the part of view that is nearest to the observer, especially in a picture or photograph, and as a verb, it means make something the most prominent or important feature. Hence, foreground means to bring something into one's attention by placing it in front and make it prominent. It is generally used as a technique to highlight or underline the meaning of something in an artistic work, as in photography, paintings, literature, stylistics, and so on. It is done to attract the attention of the readers. Moreover, foregrounding is used to shift the attention of the reader from what is said to how it is said. In systematic functional linguistics, foregrounding refers to a prominent portion of a text that contributes to a total meaning. The background provides the relevant context for the foreground. Jan Mukarwski pioneered the concept of foregrounding in Russian as Acuteliske and is rendered into English as foregrounding. Foregrounding, as mentioned above, refers to various effects of style that a writer uses to highlight or shock or to drag the attention of reader towards it. It can be used at phonetic level like through alliteration, rhyme, etc., or at the grammatical level by using inversion, ellipsis, etc., or at the semantic level by employing metaphors, irony, etc. Further, Mukharbsky notes that foregrounding exists everywhere, like in oral discourse or journalistic writings, etc. However, he says in literature it is more organized and structured and in a hierarchical manner, as in one aspect of writing or device dominates the other. Stylistics is a literary theory that uses linguistic devices in order to analyze a literary writing, either prose or poetry. Apart from this, there are various other devices that stylistics use, like deviation and punctuation, morphological deviation, synectical deviation, metaphor as deviant, collocation, semantic deviation, repetition, phonological repetition, lexical repetition, syntax repetition, and parallelism. आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसे लगे हमें कमेंट करके बताएं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी हो तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।